Hi there. Today we'll be talking about the classic Panasonic Lumix GH4. Let's get started. So this camera released in 2014, and this was one of the first hybrid cameras which had pretty amazing features for videography. This was one of the first cameras as well to have cinema 4K, and it was just so popular after release. It was used by indie filmmakers and YouTubers. It was one of the most popular options around 2014, 15, 16, 17. And from the time this camera released, I also remember seeing a lot of videos on YouTube where these two cameras were constantly compared with each other. The GH4 was actually loaded with features which even lots of new cameras don't have today. This camera could do slow-mo, 60 frames and also 96 frames. This camera could record cinema 4K. It pretty much, at that time, this was the ultimate camera when it released. It could do everything possible. The camera has a micro four thirds sensor, and it wasn't a big issue because just like other micro four thirds cameras, there's this flexibility of pretty much adapting any lens you want. You can put on a Canon, Sony, or pretty much there's no limit to what you can do with these cameras. Since it's a hybrid camera, you can also take photos with this camera. Although I feel at the time when it released, this was not the best photography camera, and it was also something that was made for filmmakers. You can get decent pictures, but I definitely feel for photography it wasn't the strongest tool. And today I think phones can take pretty good pictures, so I would not use this camera or recommend anyone to use this camera for photography. If you have to, if it's your only camera, then sure, why not? But otherwise, I think phones are pretty good, and there are definitely better options for photographers out there than this. This camera is definitely something for filmmakers. One of the issues with this camera was that since it's a micro four thirds sensor, it wouldn't perform great in low light. The image would be very noisy, but just like any other micro four thirds camera, you can always attach a speed booster to adapt any lens, or you can just get like fast lenses with wide aperture and shoot pretty much in any low light situation. The camera came with multiple profiles for capturing the image, with two cinematic profiles, the Cine D and Cine V. And there was an additional add-on of Vlog L, a flat profile, which was pretty popular. It had its pros and cons, but it was still used widely by everyone across the world. All indie filmmakers use that profile. Also, a few YouTubers use it. I've seen a lot of music videos where the filmmakers actually shoot with that profile. Also, that being said, I know a lot of people use the Atomos monitor and recorders with this camera, but I'm not going to get into that because we're just talking about the camera body by itself, how good it is just by attaching a lens to it. One great thing about this camera, which I think this camera still is one of the best when it comes to battery life. This camera, like, I think in one go you can easily get 3 to 3.5 hours of battery life. If you're shooting HD, it can go up to 4. And all you need is like one extra battery and you're good for the day. It has pretty crazy battery life. So, and I don't think I've ever used a camera which has been so good with battery life. It's definitely one of the best out there. So, just like I mentioned earlier in the video, when this camera released, there were constant comparisons with this camera, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera Original. The Pocket camera came before the GH4, and I do remember at that time people did love the GH4 a lot more than the Pocket camera. The Pocket camera had a lot of issues, one being the battery life. Here you got like 30 to 40 minutes, this one 3 to 4 hours. This would max out at HD, 30 frames. This one can do 4K, and in HD it can go up to 96 frames or just 60 frames in normal mode. So overall, people did prefer this camera a lot more back then. This was definitely the more popular option than this. But over time, this camera got more popular, and now this camera is still popular, it's still relevant. Like I said earlier, this camera has features which modern cameras don't. It's still a very powerful tool. Another comparison between the two cameras was that GH4 had way better preamps than this one. This camera, the Pocket camera, I've made a video about the sound, and I definitely criticize the sound a lot for this camera and don't recommend recording sound internally because the preamps are really bad. This one, definitely, I don't even think it's a fair comparison. It's way better. But when you're talking about cameras, the most important thing about a camera is the image it captures. The Pocket camera definitely was a lot superior, and I think is still a lot superior than a lot of the modern cameras when it comes to the image. It looks like film. It's a true cinema image. But the GH4 is not too far apart. I think it's still a great option. The image it captures is good, but if you look at the image side by side, the Pocket camera definitely, I feel, is a superior image, but that's also a personal opinion. Some people might find the GH4 image better, but for me, if I have to pick between the two, I would definitely pick the Pocket camera. In some places you can still get the GH4 new, but they do sell this camera online. I noticed on eBay specifically, I don't know about other online platforms, I saw people selling this camera for $400 to $1,200, and the range is so wide because I did notice that some people do give a cage and battery and extra accessories with it. If just the body, it's a little cheaper, and it also depends on the condition because this camera is almost 7 to 8 years old. But even after 7 or 8 years, it's still a very powerful tool. So for new filmmakers, I think this is a great tool. For beginners, I think it's a pretty good camera to get started with. Like I mentioned, it's cheap enough. It's you can get it for $400 or $500, $600, depending on the condition. Also, it's a pretty good B cam for the GH5 or any other camera, including this guy if you're using this. I have only used this camera on one film project. I used it because I wanted the grainy look with the Vlog L. And so there's a 4-minute portion in a film where this is used. But for YouTube, like the videos you guys watch, this is definitely one of the cameras I use. It's simple to use, it's small. In this little package, you pretty much have everything you need as a filmmaker. All you gotta do is just attach a lens and attach a mic, and you're good to go. One downside, which this camera does not have though, is with the new one, like GH5 is very well known for its IBIS. This camera does not have IBIS, but that does not mean you cannot go handheld. If you use the Panasonic lenses, the stabilized ones, I think you can still go handheld. If you pair this camera up with some nice modern lenses or vintage glass, I think it performs great. I personally still use this camera. I have this camera simply because for YouTube, the videos you guys see, I often use this camera, and I also pair it up with the GH5 quite often. I use this camera for small projects simply because you can get the work done very quickly. One battery can last long, like I mentioned, and the file sizes are significantly smaller than a cinema camera. So, which is why I think this is a pretty useful tool to have in your bag as a B cam, or if you're a new filmmaker, then as an A cam. So is this camera relevant in 2021, or let's also add 2022 since we only have 3 more months to go? I think yes, and I think this camera will be relevant for the next 2-3 years simply because it's packed with a lot of things which modern cameras don't have, at this price especially. The slow motion, the log profile, just the image it captures, and it's one body which has everything you need. So that's the most important thing. Since I talk a lot about this camera on this channel, we all know it's hard to find, but this guy is from the same era as the pocket camera. If you cannot get that, this is a pretty good option. It definitely has a lot more things packed in a body than the original pocket camera, but that one has a better image quality. This one is very superior too. Again, my personal opinion. You can have a different opinion, and you can still get your film made very well. And the most important thing is that when you're making a film, the equipment does not matter. It's the story that matters. So like I said earlier, when I started a few years back as a filmmaker, most of my competitors were using this. This was the more popular camera at the time. And not just the filmmakers, even YouTubers were using this camera. It was very popular. A quick special mention, the G7 as well. At that time, the GH4 and the G7 were paired together. G7 was usually the B cam and GH4 was the A cam. Now, after a few years, this can also be a very good B cam if you use the G9 or the GH5. The 6 is around the corner. It will be announced soon, I think in a month or 2. I hope so as well. And then this can also be a good B cam for the pocket camera or the pocket 4K. It just depends how you use it. If you know how to use it, then it's a great tool. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If possible, please subscribe. You can let me know your thoughts in the comments section, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.